Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. I saw something in my painting by Beep is Boo. To give a little bit of background, my family is heavily Catholic. I find myself a bit skeptical about anything spiritual or religious, but I don't know how else to really explain what happened to me. When I was around 14 or 16, maybe as a way to distance myself from the church, I found an intense interest in the occult, paganism, things of that sort. I would even practice witchcraft from time to time in an attempt to get some kind of definitive proof that something was out there. Nothing really worked, but it did feel like something was happening when I practiced. A practice I got especially into and would do frequently was meditation, which isn't inherently spiritual, but it does help in certain cases. Anyway, this story starts while I was meditating in my room. I was maybe halfway through my 15 minutes I had planned to meditate, when something just felt wrong. I can't properly explain the emotion that I had. My best attempt would be the feeling of going down off the peak of a roller coaster, mixed with sorrow. I felt that in my gut, and I opened my eyes to scan the room. Everything looked in place, but that damn feeling just wouldn't go away. I turned to pause my timer, and that's when I noticed a painting on my wall which I had had for quite a while. It was the Starry Night painting by Van Gogh. As I scanned over it, something about it was just wrong. It looked as if all the stars were actually glowing. The longer I looked, the more bright a certain star got. It was one of the stars in the top left corner, just to the right of the tree. The star slowly but surely got brighter and brighter. I was so sure I was dreaming or hallucinating that I got up off my bed and started to make my way toward the painting. But as I got up and started to move closer, the star began to fade. It wasn't as if someone was dimming the lights, though. It was as if a fog was settling over that star. As I got even closer, the fog practically snuffed out the star, and in its place was a dark spot. I sat for a minute just trying to process what had happened in my brain, still looking at this dark spot on my painting. As I stared, though, something started to appear out of the dark noise. At first, I thought it was the star coming back into my vision, but as it became more clear, I saw it for what it really was. A face. A whole figure, actually, big enough to cover a large portion of the painting. I remember my fight or flight kicking in when I realized what I was looking at. I distinctly remember thinking that the feeling of that experience went from curious to bad. But still, I stayed in place and waited to see what else would happen. It was like I was in some kind of trance. Once the figure was fully visible, I felt like it saw me. We were looking at each other eye to eye, soul to whatever it was. We sat there for 20 seconds or so with nothing happening, and I was about to be done with it and run out of the room. But then it did something. It started to reach out its hand. Not in a threatening way, almost as if it was offering something. I didn't really know what it was selling, but I wasn't buying. Its hand almost looked as if it was fully outside of the painting. That was the last straw. I had gotten my taste of the paranormal for the night, so I ran to my light switch and flicked on my bright overhead light. I had a dimmer lamp on for my meditation. I looked at the painting, and it was totally normal. There was nothing different about it. I sat and stared to see if something would happen, but nothing did. As I was coming back from my trance, I realized that my face was wet with tears, something I hadn't noticed before the light was on. I then grabbed my phone to text anybody, tell someone about this, but I stopped before even unlocking it. Almost 30 minutes had passed since I had paused the timer. It felt like an impossibly long time. I mean, there was absolutely no way I spent 30 minutes staring at a painting. It honestly felt like maybe 3 or 4 minutes of watching. After realizing my little time loss, I freaked out and ran into my mom's room. I needed someone else's presence. I just couldn't stand being alone. I told her my whole story, and she was 100% convinced that I had just had a run-in with a demonic presence. I mean, putting meaning behind all the visions, like how that star was the Holy Ghost and the demons putting a fog over them. That sort of thing. I didn't know if I was fully on board with that idea, but I was just glad to be with someone other than myself. She then got my dad to go in and bless the room, leaving a St. Benedict medal in my room to hopefully ward off anything negative. My dad then took the painting off the wall and took it outside, and that was the last time I saw it. I mean, good riddance, right? I'm actually typing this out in the same room that all happened in, and I still feel kind of off at times in here, like I'm being watched, but having the medal and several crucifixes helps erase that feeling. I'm 19 now and about to be headed out for college, and I thought I'd put this experience in writing before it fades anymore with time. I'm not exactly Catholic now, but I have given up the practices of my past. I'm fully open to any and all explanations that anyone might have as to what happened to me so many years ago, paranormal or otherwise. Thanks. Don't Go to the Gas Station at Night by Important Self. One night, I stupidly made the decision to go get gas at 11 p.m. because I didn't make time before work to go. As I pulled up to the gas station, there were a couple of other cars at the pumps, which I sort of felt relieved about, and felt more safe going in. Man, was I wrong. I went inside to pay the clerk since I was using cash, and as I was going to the pump to put gas in, most of the cars had left except this one truck parked 2 pumps beside me. I got in my car to wait for my gas to be filled, and I was on my phone, when all of a sudden, I saw this guy walking around the front of my car very suspiciously. I sort of glanced up to see what he was doing, but at that point I had made eye contact with him. Shit. He then proceeded to ask if I had any change for gas, and I nodded no, sorry. And he said, "Okay, that's cool. Hey, do you want me to remove your gas pump for you?" I said, "No, I'm good, thanks." And at that point, my gas had filled up, and he knew. He was kind of fidgety as well, and then walked behind my car. I was trying to not glance back and be subtle about looking where he was because I didn't want to alarm him with how terrified I was. In my head, I was thinking, how could I leave my car with him still hanging around my car? He was out of sight at that point, and no one was in the lot, so I was waiting till another car pulled up. 5 minutes later, no one did. So my fight or flight response was really kicking my ass on what I should do next. It was really cold out, I hadn't turned my car on because the pump was still in my car, and I didn't know where this guy was. Then, finally, I saw him walk towards his truck, but not get in it, just around it. But as soon as his back was towards me, I went for it. I took the pump out, and he noticed and quickly approached me and said, "Oh, hey, you're really beautiful." He was still walking towards me as I nodded and quickly but subtly put my gas cap back on. And he said, "I don't look like a serial killer, do I?" But he had this crazed look in his eyes, like, "Yeah, motherfucker, actually you do." At that point, I just bolted into my car and drove off quickly. So, ladies, please avoid the gas stations at night or carry some sort of protection, because I sure as hell will from now on. I've learned my lesson. It wasn't as bad as it sounds, but it definitely could have taken a different turn had I done things differently. It's Getting Dark, Kid, by Anonymous. This was Halloween of 1998. I'm in my 50s now, so I might as well let this one go to the internet. I was not a big fan of Halloween. I'm the boring guy. I didn't really want to go out that much, and I'd rather much stay at home by myself. But on that Halloween, I almost had a nervous breakdown. I'm a vet, and without going into too much detail, nothing really throws me off. I've seen the worst, and the only thing that gets to me now are my random nightmares. I had just gotten off of work and came back home on Halloween Day. I wasn't really tired, but also not in the mood for trick-or-treaters. I don't decorate on purpose just so the kids on my block know not to come by my house. I didn't want to be bothered. So I took a shower, ate dinner, and was having a drink for the night, around, I'd say, 11 or 12. That's when I heard this loud banging coming from my front door. I got irritated. Whoever was on my porch sounded like they were going to break the damn door down. Half drunk, I looked out the window, and my memory is a little foggy, but I thought I saw someone standing near my walkway. I opened the door and yelled out something like, "Who's there?" and slammed the door back. I was suddenly really heated. Another hour passed, and that same heavy pounding came from the front of the house. My patience had run out by that time, so I grabbed my shotgun and went to the door. I peeked out the window and saw this kid standing at my door that late into the night. I wasn't about to let my guard down, but I felt kind of bad for the kid, too. I mean, it was late. I didn't see any parents, so what the hell was going on? I put my gun down and opened the door to get a better look at this kid. He looked like he had his school clothes on, but he had on this scary-ass mask. If any of you have seen that movie From Dusk Till Dawn, his mask looked like Frost's face when he turned into a vampire. I mean, it was weird, but I could also tell it was a mask. I can't remember what I said beat for beat, but the kid didn't answer anything I was asking him. At the end of my questions, I said something like, "It's getting pretty dark, kid. Why don't you go home, man?" Now, when I said this, the kid just stood there silent. I thought about calling the cops, but by that time I was feeling the brandy. So I sort of turned the kid around and just said, "Go home." I would have helped him out more, but like I said, I was drunk. None of that shit mattered anyway, as I was about to find out. I closed the door and hopped into my bed to get some rest. Sometime later in the morning, that same crazy knocking happened again. I shot up out of bed, and the first two things I noticed were that I was sweating. For some reason, I was also scared, or like I felt scared, and my house was completely dark. I grabbed my shotgun again and headed to the front door, but this time, nobody was outside. That's when my panic attack really started to kick in. I ran downstairs to flip the lights back on, and nothing was blown. There was no noise, no knocking, just a dark house. I looked over to my neighbors, and their lights were on, so I made a quick call to the power company. Out of all the houses on my block, only mine was the one to lose power. Nobody else did. I couldn't help but think of that kid. I don't know, maybe he did something. But for sure, I've never been that unsettled by something like that, outside of combat. Get Frightened, Learn a Lesson by Linjahaha. This happened many years ago when I was a dumb kid and messed with something I shouldn't have, only to regret it later. My cousins, who I'll refer to as C and K, lived in Cleveland, Ohio. My folks would take us to visit with them quite frequently through the years while we were growing up, since C was my age and K was my sister J's age, 5 years younger. So C and I were the big sisters. We were the big girls, around 13 or 14 at the time. On this visit, it was during the fall. We did all the stupid things that kids do before they develop something in their later years called common sense. We told ghost stories a lot and recorded our antics on a little 3-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder that I had. We'd play back what we recorded just for fun, and we'd also go exploring or walking to places that we thought were interesting. In other words, we just had a lot of fun together. On this time, while visiting their house in Cleveland, one of us, I don't remember, had the idea to conduct a seance. Since I had had some paranormal experiences when I was much younger, I was selected to conduct it. And lucky me. I didn't really give too much credence to what we were about to do at the time, but I wished later that I would have. They lived in a relatively smallish size house. There was the master bedroom downstairs that my aunt and uncle slept in, a spare room that they kind of used like a playroom, and it was small but big enough to accommodate a sofa, TV stand, easy chair, and 2 little end tables. My cousin's bedroom was upstairs, and it was originally the attic when they bought the house, but my aunt and uncle labored to turn it into a lovely girl's bedroom of a very large size, with a walk-in closet and a cubbyhole room on one side of the hallway. We decided to hold the seance in the back spare room. We closed the door and just lit a small lamp to give off a soft light. Before starting, we had to decide who we wanted to contact. The vote was to contact, and get this, King Tut. I began the seance with a tongue-in-cheek attitude, quite frankly. However, as things progressed, I began to take it seriously. We were all concentrating on calling him while holding hands and staring at the lamplight. It was about 10 minutes into the session that we started to observe something forming in the corner behind the easy chair that sat next to the window. It was rather short of stature, standing rather off-center, and a vaporous gas fire blue. It honestly looked like a short person. We sat speechless and transfixed, just staring at it. We were squeezing each other's hands so hard, I'm surprised that we didn't break each other's fingers. I mean, that's how stunned we were. But suddenly the spell was broken when I had what felt like 2 fingers forcefully rammed into my right ribcage, causing me to jump and scream. We all unclasped hands and watched as the form just evaporated from the corner of the room. One of my cousins jumped up to the light switch and turned the lights on, and our parents came to the back room and demanded to know what we were up to. And the usual answer from us kids came, "Nothing." They just told us to keep it down. We didn't dare tell our parents what we were really doing. Our parents were religious, and what we were doing was a major big-time no-no. So we all just sat there looking at each other and glancing around the room, trying to evaluate what really had happened. So, who poked me so hard that it hurt? No one was even near me, and I know what I felt. It actually hurt. Matter of fact, I did get a little bruise between my ribs to prove it. I decided then and there, no more conducting seances. It was far too scary for my taste. However, this was not the end of things. Months later, in the good old summertime, our cousins came to visit us. We went upstairs to my sister's in my bedroom, and C and K wanted to have another seance. I protested, but they talked me into it. Ugh. Our bedroom was, once, the attic also, but our parents worked hard to turn it into a beautiful bedroom for us as well. So we all sat on the floor and lit a candle. We were discussing who we wanted to contact, and one of my cousins mentioned Adolf Hitler. I gave a resounding no way. I told them to contact someone nice, not a monster like that. So we decided on Abraham Lincoln. He was always my favorite president next to JFK. so we held hands once again and concentrated. This time I asked for an audible signal like 2 knocks. Inside of a couple of minutes, we heard 2 loud knocks resounding from our cubbyhole crawl space that we used for storage, and we all heard it. I lost my nerve at that point and told it to go away, and I broke the circle. I told my cousins that what we were doing was not a good idea, that we shouldn't be messing with stuff like this. My cousins, though, were intrigued, but my little sister listened to me. Unusual for a little sister to listen to the big sister. But Jay looked up to me, as if I said it's a bad idea, then it must be a bad idea. However, that was not quite the end of it that night. Unbeknownst to me, the worst was yet to come. After my cousins went home, we went to bed for the night. Nothing strange there. Jay and I had twin beds, one on each side of the room across from one another. Next to our beds and built into the walls were shadow boxes that we kept little knickknacks, some ceramic animals, books, and we each had a little doll sitting on the cases. About 2 a.m, I heard what I first thought was my dad tromping up the steps to our room. He would sometimes come up and check on us, as parents often do. Only this time, he didn't turn on the hallway light coming up the steps. He would bring his flashlight with him to shine just far enough to make sure we were in bed and all right. But this time, there was no hall light or flashlight. I thought that was very strange for him, and I was lying on my stomach pretending to be asleep, when I got a feeling that it wasn't my dad coming to look in on us after all. I then heard very heavy footsteps on the tile floor coming towards us. My dad was always barefoot when he did his checks. This, whatever it was, had heavy-soled shoes on. I suddenly felt enveloped in an intense cold, to the point I started shivering. It was weird. This was summertime, and that upstairs bedroom was ridiculously hot at that time of year. And in 1968, we didn't have AC. We always just slept with the windows open for air. I laid there motionless and barely breathing with my eyes closed tight, and I felt a definite weight leaning over me, and I heard the items in my shadow box being moved around. After that, I heard it go over to my sister's bed and do the same thing. I was freaking out. And then I heard it turn and walk away back down the steps. I just fell asleep after all of that was over. In the morning, my sister started accusing me of knocking all the stuff in her shadow box over. However, everything was knocked over in my shadow box as well. And I told her exactly what had happened during the night, and her face went blank. We both were really scared, and we vowed to never conduct a seance again. A couple of weeks later, I confessed to my mom what we had done. As expected, she read me the riot act. My mom was deeply religious and told me that only God has the power to do those things. I was upset and ashamed, and I promised I would never do something disrespectful like that again. At that time in my life, I didn't even give a thought to what we did. To us dumb kids, we thought it was cool. But cool turned on us and brought us to our senses the hard way. I guess that some of the best lessons learned are those that we do learn the hard way. I've, since that time, have never again experimented with conducting or participating in seances. I realize that you can't command the spirits to perform for amusement. If anything, you have to respect them. I've had visitations from my late husband, but I never tried to contact him. He came to me as an assurance that he was all right and loved me. He did visit me in special circumstances when I was extremely stressed and trepidatious about something, just to give me comfort. I do believe that our loved ones do that to comfort and encourage us. And that's fine with me, but I no longer try to contact the other side. I know better. I learned my lesson as a kid. If you don't know what you're doing, just don't do it. You'll be better off in the long run. Stranger in the Woods by Doesn't Matter. I've never told this story, but I remember it clearly. There were some woods next to one of my friends' houses that we used to walk through all the time when we were teenagers. Back in the woods a bit, there were the remains of some old structure, like a small house or something. There were concrete walls about chest high, no ceiling or roof left, and a lot of it was overgrown. We had a group of 4 friends back in the woods during the day, and we decided to try to clear out the structure a little bit. We had a hatchet, machete, some pocket knives, etc. We thought we were some real Boy Scouts out there, I guess, and we cleared out some of the overgrowth. Adjacent to the structure, there was also a circular-like hole in the ground filled with some bricks. Maybe it used to be a silo? I don't know. But we dug a small hole inside the walls, put some bricks up around it, and even used some mud to hold it together. We gathered some sticks and branches, and by the time it turned dusk, we had a fire going. We were hanging out for a while until I had to go number 2, which would mean walking back to one friend's house. It was maybe a 10-minute walk or less that I'd made tons of times, so I wasn't too worried. I brought a flashlight and walked into the woods, and then I started to hear what sounded like a second set of footsteps, so I stopped. It didn't sound like an animal, and it seemed to stop every time I did. I got spooked and walked back towards the firelight where my friends were. I didn't want them to say anything, but they saw me and asked, "What are you doing coming back so soon?" I was inside the walls of the structure again, and I told them I think there's someone else out in the woods. They thought I was messing with them, and I said, "No, really." And then we heard a noise close by. It was too dark to see, but it sounded like it came from right outside the walls. To describe the sound, it was sort of like someone dropping an empty metal water bottle onto the concrete. We got up startled and dumped a lot of water on the fire and got out of the structure. The walls were crumbled enough to slip through the side, and we took the shorter, more difficult route through some of the thick brush to get to the road quicker. We got out of the woods as quick as we could and got to the road, and looking back, someone did come out of the woods behind us. All we really saw was a guy in a hoodie who followed us out of the woods and then stopped by the road. So to that guy, let's not meet again. Vegas Trip by That Dark Room. My friends and I recently visited Las Vegas for a little break that we like to take. It wasn't going to be anything too crazy, just some gambling and hookers. I kid. But we did want to have some fun since this would be our first visit there. So at first we did the usual. Lost some money and then more money on knickknacks and food. By our 3rd day there, I was getting a little bored. We'd seen most of the shows and almost everything they had for us to do. The day before our last day, I was on YouTube and saw a documentary-style video on the Vegas sewer system and the people who live there. Basically, Las Vegas has these sewer outlets for rainwater. They're supposed to be there to prevent flooding, but the homeless population have made it their home. I got the bright idea for us to smoke some weed and then go exploring. That night, I somehow convinced my other 2 friends to go with me. And after some back and forth, they said, screw it, and we headed out. It didn't take us too long to get to one of these outlets. Shit was covered in graffiti, but you could tell that people were staying there. Condoms, tampons, used toilet paper. Yeah, we saw all of that. The outlet was empty and dark, but hell if we weren't going to go in there. We walked for a good minute passing the joint and trying to scare each other, and we couldn't see where this thing ended, but we decided to trek on. The first thing we came upon was a tent. Nothing too crazy. It had used needles and garbage around it, so we knew other people were down there. We walked a little further, and I thought I could see something in the darkness. Something moving. but I ignored it, thinking there are homeless people down here. Around that time is when this blood-curdling sound came out of nowhere. It sounded like it came from in front of us, so we all stopped dead in our tracks. My friends looked at me, and I looked at them. It's like we already knew it was time to get the hell out of there. With a little more panic, we started going back in the opposite direction we had come from. We walked for a good 10 minutes, and then I had this sort of revelation that the tent we had passed coming in, well, we should have passed it again by now. I didn't say that out loud, but I clearly remember thinking it. None of us was talking much, and we even put out the little weed we had brought with us. Everyone was just walking fast now, trying not to step on a needle or into someone's dinner. More time passed, and we still weren't at the end of the tunnel. That's when I spoke up. I stopped walking and asked, "Shouldn't we be out of here already?" And right as I was saying the word already, we heard something in front of us again, really close now. That's when we all started running and tripping and fumbling, anything to get out of that tunnel. Not even 2 minutes after we had started running, we could see the opening. So we got to the end, got outside, out of breath and confused. I mean, most likely because of the weed. What the hell was the noise we heard? The first question that we asked. The next was, did anyone feel someone behind them? None of those questions got answers, except the last one. I'm not even sure what we did for the rest of the night, but this now just lives in my memory as something weird that happened in Las Vegas. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you'd like to hear your story narrated on this channel, send it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you have a second and you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. I'd love to know what you thought of the stories. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description and consider purchasing some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is down there as well. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.